Okay, so we finished that first part of our installation. We're getting ready to restart. So what's happening is Windows does an initial boot or an initial load from the operating system, and then it works through that first part. It's the Windows pre-installation environment process. And then when it boots again, it's going to boot actually off of the C drive. So at this point, it's booting off the installation that I just had. Now, I do want to draw your attention to one thing, and you might have to roll your video back a little bit. But you'll notice when it started to boot, it gave you the option to press any key to boot from the CD or DVD. Now, if you do that, what that is that is the CD asking if you want to boot off of it again. If you hit a key at that point, you restart the installation process. It doesn't continue on, it restarts again from the very beginning. So you got to be careful about that, or you might end up doing this process more than once. But if you let that expire, then the CD doesn't boot. It comes over and boots off of the hard drive and continues the installation. And that's what we're seeing right now. So we've copied over all of the files. Now we're doing a bunch of configuration and setting up the operating system. And you've seen some status updates down here come across. You see it now running this little getting ready cycle, and it will sit here and spin. And how long it takes to get through this process is going to depend on the speed of your machine. Now, I'm running this inside a virtual machine, so it's going to take a little bit longer than it would off of most hardware. Some high speed SSD based computers can actually do this process in just a few minutes. The entire process, the entire installation. Some of them are going to take a little bit longer. And this is one that's going to take a little bit longer just because of what I'm running it with. So at this point, probably depending on your hardware, sometimes it is a get up, walk away, go get a cup of coffee, come back kind of process. As long as it's continuing to spin here, though, you don't have to worry about it. This is something to be aware of, is that sometimes we get a little impatient and we think that the installation process might have broken, and so we'll break out of it or we'll try to restart or something to that effect. And that tends to create more problems. So, if you're the kind of person who tends to get impatient, here are a couple of things you can look for to make sure that it's still running. Um, Look for, well, the circle going around is the first indicator. That's not always a foolproof one, though. So, look for hard drive activity. See if the hard drive activity light is flashing, or you can listen for hard drive activity. And if you hear that there is, that obviously doesn't work with an SSD, but if you've got a standard hard drive, you may be able to hear the hard drive running. You might be able to hear it reading and writing. If you see that hard drive activity, then just be patient and let it continue to run. So, in this case, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to let it continue to run. Uh, I've actually had issues with systems that took long enough to boot that I would get impatient, so I would actually leave the room. And I would go do something else, come back a while later, wait for it to finish coming up. And that kept me from getting impatient and trying to restart the system at some point. Okay, so we'll give this a few more seconds. And all right, we're just about there. Okay, we're booting again. Here's that boot, pressing the key to boot from CD or DVD that I was talking about a little bit earlier. So we finished our first configuration pass. We're rebooting again, coming up again with more of this little please wait while I continue to process. Again, not a big deal. We just be patient and wait for it to run. Same thing as before. If we're worried about it, we can check hard drive activity light or listen for hard drive activity. In general, it normally runs fast enough that unless you're really impatient or you're really worried about it, it doesn't create a problem. But just something to be aware of in case you do. All right, so at this point, we've completed our first installation pass. We've rebooted. We've completed our second installation pass. We're rebooting again. It's getting ready to start prompting for more information. Now, if you are doing this in a larger deployment scenario, a lot of the questions that were asked at the beginning and questions that it's starting to ask now, we can bypass with an unattended install startup script. And that's one of the reasons why we will do it, is so that we don't have to sit here and answer all of these questions. And there's a variety of different ways we can do it. We can do image-based installations. We can do startup script installations. We can write an unattend.xml file that we pair with booting off of a CD, and we can do it that way. So lots of different deployment options for you to explore. You just want to look for the one that fits you well. I'm going to go ahead and throw this to full screen so we can see this a little bit better. All right, let's start with the region. It's going to default to the United States. So I'm good with that, so I'm going to click yes. Up here, you're going to see kind of a progress indicator. Notice we're in the basics section. As we move along, we'll see that move a little bit farther. So US keyboard, yep, we're good with the US keyboard. Don't want to add a second keyboard layout right now, so we're going to click skip. All right, looking for network. Now, if you have a network connection, and in this case, I kind of have it isolated so I don't. If you have a network connection, it's going to try to set you up with that internet connection immediately. And it's going to try to set you up using Microsoft authentication rather than local authentication. So you'll end up using your Microsoft username and password to log into your local PC. And that's fine as long as you have network connection. But if you don't have an internet connection to Microsoft, it can sometimes create some problems. So if you want to use local authentication, what you have to do is disconnect your computer from the network before you get to this point. And then you can come down here and click I don't have internet. Now, because you don't, then it's going to it's going to go ahead and let you log in with a local account. And you'll notice here this little notification. There's more to discover when you connect to the internet. So if you do a full setup with a Microsoft account, you get all of these other features. So you can connect now if they talk you into it, and that's going to allow you to, plug into an Ethernet channel or try to connect through wireless network. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and continue with limited setup because I want to go ahead and use local authentication on this device. So here's where I'm going to put in the user, and I'm going to just put my own name in. Administrator is actually reserved keyword. So set my password. Actually, let me use the other password. And confirm the password. All right, and then we choose security questions. And I'm just going to make up security questions. My first pet's name was George. Not really, just so you know. And fortunately, this is going to be a temporary machine, so I'm never going to have to remember the weird things that I put in here. Okay. So those security questions are in case you ever lock yourself out of the computer, which does happen fairly often. All right, privacy settings. Now, this is something to be aware of. These are all of the categories of information that will be shared with Microsoft if we allow them to use it. And a lot of it is going to be shared with Microsoft anonymously. So some of it, however, is not. And so the tendency here is to just click accept and keep going. But I'm going to encourage you to actually look at what these are and decide whether this is information that you actually want to share with Microsoft or not. And when you click no, you'll see these notifications pop up that say, all right, if you don't share, this is what you're missing out on. And there's not really one right or wrong answer to these questions. The issue is just be aware of what it is that you are setting up for yourself or for your client, so you know what you're committing yourself to. That way we don't get surprised later on when we realize we've shared more information than we intended to. All right, I'm not going to set up Cortana right now. And so we will, now that we've prompted for all this information, and remember this can all be done using image-based installation or automated script or something like that. But since we did it all manually, we answer all of those questions directly. And this is something else to keep in mind, by the way, if you're doing an unintended script install, make sure that you get all the questions answered the way you want. If you skip questions, then it's going to go back to the Microsoft default. So just make sure that when you do your unattend script, if you're using an unattend XML file to automate the installation process, make sure that you get all of these things answered. Now, this is the last configuration phase. And you can see the notification, it might take several minutes. It's finishing off all of the configurations, and when it gets done with this phase, we should be ready to log in using the username and password that we set up earlier. Now, if you set this up using Microsoft authentication, it's not a big deal. Again, be aware of what you're getting into, know what you're doing. But there's some people will say it has to be one way or the other. I say, just be aware of what you're committing to. And don't take things for granted either way. So if we were using that Microsoft authentication for our login, it would come up and we would log in using our Microsoft account rather than log in using the local account that we just created. Okay, so at this point, we've pretty much answered all of the questions that we're going to have to answer. Everything else is just waiting for it to process. And there we go. Logged in, and we are currently running an evaluation license. We can, well, I would have to go in and activate this if I was doing a regular installation for somebody else. Otherwise, it's going to shut down on me in 90 days or so. But seeing as it's a demo, I'm not that worried about it. Okay, so at this point, we are up and running with a brand new clean installation of Windows 10.